A stark warning from the Chancellor. The financial hangover of the past 18 months is going to cost all of us. Rishi Sunak gave a clear hint today that he feels tax rises are unavoidable in order to kickstart the economy.
I have to be blunt with you. Our recovery comes with a cost. Our national debt is almost 100% of GDP. So we need to fix our public finances.
One thing the Chancellor didn't talk much about was the fate of those about to face a crippling cut in universal credit. Paul will have a special report on that. We'll also get Robert's analysis from the Tory party conference in Manchester, also in News at 10 tonight. Trapped and hiding from the Taliban, the British citizens still left in Afghanistan after their loved ones reached the UK. How football's racist fans are getting away with it. Claims that the fight against racism is being undermined from within.
How do they expect to eradicate racism on our terraces if they won't even have an observer at these matches?
No Instagram, no WhatsApp, no Facebook. What's behind the Silicon Valley giant's global blackout on its platforms? And in Mozart's footsteps, the 14-year-old violin virtuoso taking the mantle of the greatest child prodigy in musical history.
This is ITV News at 10 with Rageh Omaar.
Good evening. Rishi Sunak today warned there would be no post-pandemic recovery without a cost. In his first major speech to the Tory faithful at the party conference, he appeared to shed his image of the free-spending Chancellor he's become known for over the last year and a half. Mr Sunak told delegates that it would be immoral for the government to borrow any more money. Whilst he admitted that the tax rise to pay for social care was unpopular, he said the public finances needed to be put on what he called a sustainable footing. One thing that Chancellor Sunak did not talk about was this week's £20 universal credit cut for millions, or the rising cost of living, which impacts the most vulnerable harder than others. That was left to his boss, the Prime Minister, to answer, not that he seemed keen to talk about it much either.
Can we just measure that again? We just need to check.
Yes, that is what you're seeing. The Prime Minister and Chancellor literally levelling up.
Are we level? No, there we go. There we go, green light. Good. Green light, terrific. Brilliant. We're levelling up.
Shoehorning in the political slogan they hope will dominate Conservative conference in Manchester.
That's good, because people love it, don't they?
But as they showcase local investment in Northern Rail, they know the messaging comes at a precarious time for the British economy.
Are you worried about the pain of higher prices, higher national insurance and lower universal credit?
I think what you're seeing in the UK at the moment and over the last year or so, you've seen for the first time in more than a decade, you're seeing increases in wages, which is what we want to see.
So if the PM was worrying, he didn't show it as he focused on his conference mantras. His team greeted the Tory faithful and he headed to watch the Chancellor.
Is there going to be something to help ordinary working families with the cost of living this winter?
Yes, a lot.
If there was a lot in a speech that members were lining up to watch, it wasn't a lot more welfare.
Now you tell me, is the answer to their hopes and dreams just to increase their benefits?
And it wasn't a lot less tax.
I believe in fiscal responsibility. Just borrowing more money and stacking up bills for future generations to pay is not just economically irresponsible, it is immoral. Because it's not the state's money, it's your money.
But there was a fair amount of this.
I can confirm that we are expanding our successful plan for jobs into next year. Thank you.
That speech was all about Rishi Sunak trying to frame a political choice, saying that a vote for the Tories is a vote for jobs and wages. They like it in here. The difficulty is that outside this hall, another message is cutting through.
With some Northern MPs really worried about changes to national insurance and universal credit.
Maybe now is the time for the government to think again on some of those changes, because in truth, I don't know how you can level up poorer communities in the north of England while at the same time taking money out of their pocket.
So is the cost of living crisis a problem for Tory voters?
Look at the blue wall at the moment. Go and ask them. Maybe you get the answer yes. But I think a lot of them understand because it's happened because of COVID.
I think that the cost of living is going up significantly and we need to have wages coming up in relation to that.
I think they've got an uphill battle.
An uphill battle that they hope the Prime Minister can overcome. Anushka Astana, News at 10, Manchester.
As Anushka mentioned, the challenges facing families are already building up. The cost of living is rising. Last week, energy bills jumped for many as the energy price cap, which protected many of the most vulnerable, rose by £139 per year. From April, there's the 1.25 pence in the pound increase in national insurance, costing the average earner £255 per year, while at the same time, those relying on universal credit face an annual cut in excess of £1,000.
Hello, Baba. Good morning. How are you?
Insurance up, universal credit down. So what is the Chancellor doing to ensure families can eat and heat their homes this winter?
It's 7 a.m. and in the Rageh household, Brahim's work has already begun.
I'm everything. I'm hairdresser, cook, chef, everything. It's mine.
Caring for his 4 children as a lone parent is his first job. But today he'll struggle to feed them, even with a second.
Bye, see you later.
School will at least give them breakfast while he works.
If there's anything, give me a ring, yeah? I feel down. I can't give up because my kids. Yeah. I love them and I do everything for them.
So he spends 29 hours a week here. Constructing kitchen cabinets is his job, but universal credit helps him to make a living. And today he finished work hoping to hear the Chancellor say it wouldn't be cut.
One of the fastest recoveries of any major economy in the world. Now,
I don't know about that.
What isn't in doubt is that the government still intends to stop the £20 weekly uplift.
I feel down, very, very down, because I'm trying very my best. Keep working, and keep working. And in the end, you feel tired, because you're not going anywhere, like you punching this wall.
A feeling familiar to a growing many. Analysis shared with News at 10 shows how the number of working people in poverty has risen dramatically over the last decade, up by around 200,000 each year on average, now reaching over 8 million in total. And that's before the latest food, fuel and tax hikes have even been factored in.
And it does mean that for those people who are, on the edge of just about managing, that they may well fall below the poverty line.
At this dry cleaners, the rising cost of chemicals means they now turn a loss. For the owner, work no longer pays.
If I cannot afford my own living costs, then what's the point of me doing the business? Imagine if somebody keeps reaching in your pocket and just takes a little bit more and more and more and more, so how does it feel?
And with costs continuing to climb, for families like Brahim's, each day ends only with the certainty that the next will be even harder. Paul Brand, News at 10.
Paul with Brahim's story. And now let's speak to Robert, who's in Manchester. Robert, the Chancellor tried, I suppose, to strike an upbeat tone, but it sounds like there are, tough times ahead for many.
That's exactly right, Rageh. I mean, the Chancellor was really strongly positive about Britain's future, and he is spending money to try and achieve that upbeat future. £500 million on giving people new skills, creating jobs for young people, an assortment of measures that he hopes will raise the average wages in the economy. The problem is that will take years to achieve, and right now millions of people are feeling the pinch. Energy prices going up. They've just gone up a few days ago. They're going to go up again next April, almost certainly. Petrol, We've seen the crisis at the forecourts. The oil price is back at a 7-year high. Petrol prices going up. Food prices going up. So the cost of living rising very significantly. At the same time, the government is, taking measures to reduce millions of people's income. We've seen the £20 a week uplift in universal credit, so important to poorer people, removed. Come April, as you pointed out, national insurance going up, which will take hundreds of pounds away. Again, many of those people would not think of themselves as being on higher incomes, and tax thresholds frozen as well, which is another slightly less visible way of taxing us more. So it was really striking to me that there was nothing in this speech to address what many people will see as a really serious crisis. Standards of living likely to fall over months and possibly over the next year to 2 years. The most interesting thing about Rishi Sunak is he broadly sort of took on the mantle of Margaret Thatcher, saying the problem for him is the debt. He's got to get the debt down. That's why taxes are rising. It's almost a message of we're being cruel to be kind, a message we haven't actually heard from a government for years.
Robert in Manchester, thank you so much. Now, a week and a half after queues first formed outside petrol stations and pumps started running dry, the first military-driven tankers took to the road today. Welcome news, you may think, but not so, according to the body representing petrol station owners, with all the extra deliveries being outside the worst-hit areas of London and the South East.
Deployed on the ground in an oil depot, military drivers with orders to get fuel delivered where it's needed. Some of the 200 servicemen and women on this operation got behind the wheel this morning. But they couldn't get everywhere today. Even the places where they'd been training over the weekend went without.
It's calm, that's for certain, because we don't have any fuel to sell, which is very unfortunate. We had a tanker accompanied by army guys training on Saturday, and that all went very well. We traded all Saturday with both fuels, but by the evening we were out of unleaded, and then shortly the next day we were out of diesel.
And where there was fuel in Kent today, there were queues.
Can't go on like this, because it's it's ridiculous. You're having to plan, where you're getting your petrol from and all that kind of stuff, which is difficult if you're working and all that kind of stuff,
This is the first petrol station I've seen that's got petrol. I've been to loads, so just hope I get some.
Most petrol stations in most parts of the UK do have some fuel available now. But in London and the South East, where concentration of demand is particularly high, around 20% of forecourts are still dry.
We're a bit disappointed that the drivers are also working in areas which we know are now well stocked with fuel, like the Grangemouth area in Scotland and Teesside for the North and North Midlands, and so only a relatively small proportion operating out of the south to help the much challenged London and South East area.
The end of the day at this petrol station and still no fuel has arrived. The manager says he's hopeful of a delivery at some point tomorrow morning, but with customer demand as high as it is, there's every chance they'll run out again by tomorrow evening. Regular deliveries are what's needed here. The situation is improving, says the government, but in the places where demand is greatest, the tankers still can't come soon or often enough. Geraint Vincent, News at 10, Kent.
Well, let's pick up there with Joel. Joel, it looks like things when it comes to petrol stations are slowly being resolved, but the shortages in terms of labour, which caused the problems in the first place, are still there, aren't they?
Yeah, look, Rishi Sunak told conference today that the government was doing what it can to tackle the supply chain problems, but there was a limit to what it could do. He made it clear the solution here is for better training, more apprenticeships, better pay. Translation, Rageh, if companies want to fill these vacancies, they have got to pay their workers more. Now, that is a very popular message, I suspect, with the public, but it's one that's alienating some core Conservative voters. Lord Wolfson, Chief Executive of Next, he is a Tory peer. He is a Brexiteer. He is, in short, exactly the sort of guy you would expect to be 100% behind Boris Johnson's government. He isn't. Yet again, he's come out and publicly criticising it, suggesting they're making the situation work. The newspaper article, Wolfson complained, companies are trying to recruit British workers. They are raising pay, but there's a chronic shortage still in restaurants, care homes, small businesses, hospitals, fruit farms and warehouses. He writes, if the problem is employees are simply not available in sufficient numbers, then cash alone cannot conjure out more people, especially in areas of high employment. In these circumstances, raising nominal wages can only result in 70s-style inflationary spiral. Wolfson is telling the government to do what many businesses have been telling the government to do for months, bring in people from abroad. The government has been resisting, and Wolfson is suggesting its resistance has made a bad situation far, far, far worse.
A little bit of a battle brewing, I suspect.
Still to come on Wales at 6. Reaction from the conference on
Just over a month ago, amidst desperate scenes at Kabul airport, the final RAF plane carrying both British nationals and the Afghans who served alongside UK
still
forces
to come
took off.
on
The
Wales
UK promised
at 6.
that those who were
Here
eligible
is the
to
rain
be
going to
rescued
stop
but were unable to escape in time would not be forgotten. But 5 weeks on, that's exactly how many feel, abandoned and living in constant terror as they try to avoid the Taliban. One who grew up in Britain and worked as a translator for the army says 3 of his relatives have already been killed in retribution. Now he says he fears he, his wife and their children will be next.
Like right now, I'm talking to you. If they knew this, then I would not be alive.
This British citizen is in hiding in Kabul, unable to get out of Afghanistan. Targeted by the Taliban because he is a former interpreter and a member of the Panjshiri minority.
So ITV can actually see where I'm staying at the moment and how the living conditions that we are in.
He's trapped in one room with his wife and 7 children, all under 7 years of age. This their last place of safety after moving 6 times in the last 4 days to escape the Taliban, who've already killed 3 of his relatives. He fears he will be next after they threatened his wife.
If you speak about this, we will come back, cut off your kids' heads, and then your head afterwards. So it was pretty hectic because I wasn't there to see all of that, because I would have obviously tried to stop them.
Last week, he faced an agonising decision to leave on a British government-organised flight out, but he would have to leave his wife and kids behind. As Afghan passport holders, they had to apply for visas via a consulate, while officials admitted there weren't any in Kabul.
No father will make that decision, and no husband will make that decision.
Desperate and fearing for his life, Samir did leave on one of the last flights out to the UK. But it came at a cost and with huge regret. He had to leave without his wife.
I feel guilty that I couldn't bring my family and my wife, so I feel a bit selfish. I had to make a choice and she forced me to leave.
Across Kabul, fighters emerging fresh from the battlefields are now patrolling the streets of the Afghan capital, with numerous reports of a regime that has descended into vengeance and score settling.
This one wakes up every night. He's crying. He's saying, I want Baba. Baba means dead.
In the UK, this mother of 4 consoles her children but is terrified for her British husband stuck in Afghanistan. He left 2 young sons and newborn twins in London to help save his mum and sister 6 weeks ago. Now he's in hiding after being severely beaten by the Taliban, and he feels abandoned.
I don't want to lose my husband back there. I just need him here. I just want him here. I feel like it means nothing. A British citizen, a British passport.
It's more than a month since flights closed from Kabul airport amid desperate scenes as people scrambled to leave before Western troops pulled out, with promises that those eligible to leave but left behind would not be forgotten. The Foreign Office told us it's continuing to uphold that promise to secure their safe passage, but that it won't comment on individual cases. But for the many left behind with a British passport, which pledges to protect its citizens wherever they may be, these promises feel hollow. Sejal Karia, News at 10.
3 of the biggest social media websites remain down tonight, 5 hours after the first fell offline. Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp are all reporting errors. Robert Moore is in Washington. Any idea, Robert, what's behind this?
Well, what a technical fiasco for Facebook and for its family of products and services, including, as you say, Instagram and WhatsApp. At about 4:41 this afternoon, London time, all of those services went offline simultaneously, cutting communications for as many as 3 billion people. And no, Rageh, it's not entirely clear what happened. Most experts here believe it's linked to Facebook servers, that it's not anything like a cyber attack or malicious. But what it is deeply embarrassing for the company, because it comes just 24 hours after a whistleblower at Facebook came forward and identified herself with documents making really serious allegations that Facebook executives unknowingly have used their algorithms to spread false information, that Facebook products as well add considerable emotional stress to its young users, particularly young teenage girls who are dealing with a fraught issue of body image. That whistleblower is appearing here on Capitol Hill tomorrow, but it must be said Facebook is denying those allegations vociferously. But if you've had a bad day in the office, think of those Facebook engineers who tonight are still trying to get their services back online.
OK, perfect storm for Facebook. Thank you, Robert, in Washington. In recent months, we have sadly become accustomed to the repeated racist abuse of players in European football. But ITV News has learnt that while scrutiny on the issue has never been higher, the governing body has been without one of its key weapons in the fight. Since 2013, UEFA has relied on trained undercover spotters at high-risk matches. That is, until this season, when they failed to renew the contract, making it even harder to identify and punish fans breaking the law.
For the beautiful game, the ugly issue of racism has rarely been more prominent. UEFA putting together this film just a few months ago to show its determination to tackle the issue.
If you're doing nothing about it, I think you're part of the problem.
But part of the solution appears to have been removed by UEFA. It normally has independent observers at high-risk matches like this one in Prague, where Rangers' Glenn Kamara was booed last week whenever he touched the ball, despite the fact the crowd was limited to school children after a previous racist incident. The club's complaint sparked a diplomatic incident, the Czechs hauling in the ambassador after Sparta claimed their fans were the victims of British xenophobia. For Kamara's disbelieving lawyer, UEFA's fight against racism now looks more like an exercise in PR.
They have the banners about respect. Where's the respect for the black players? Why is there no renewal of contract? Where is the independent observers? How do they expect to eradicate racism on our terraces if they won't even have an observer at these matches?
Instead, the FAIR network, which recruits and trains the spotters, has been reduced to highlighting problematic moments like this on social media. These fans from Bulgaria pictured before a match, but couldn't be monitored inside it. In a statement, UEFA admitted there was a gap, telling ITV News the contract with FAIR for providing match observers is currently being renewed, and therefore no external observers were deployed at UEFA matches. But campaigners point out there's no explanation of why the contract wasn't renewed sooner or when that will be put right.
It's unacceptable. It should have been done yesterday, and it's not. It's still ongoing. And the fact that they're just saying that they are in talks means it's nowhere near to be done, which is very shameful.
More players than ever before are taking a stance against discrimination, just as the governing body that promised to raise its game seems instead and incomprehensibly to have dropped the ball. Rachel Younger, News at 10.
The under-fire head of the Metropolitan Police today ordered an independent inquiry into the force following the kidnap and murder of Sarah Everard. Dame Cressida Dick said she understood how Sarah's brutal killing by PC Wayne Couzens had badly dented public trust in policing. It will, though, be 6 months, we're told, before it even gets going. Anger boiled over once again this morning as the campaign group Insulate Britain targeted numerous major roads in and around London. Commuters and, at one point, an ambulance worker took it upon themselves to attempt to clear the roads. But when we confronted one of the group's leaders for the distress their action had caused, he was unrepentant, to say the least.
On 4 main routes into London this morning, Insulate Britain protesters once again stopped the traffic. They claim their tactics are working. Road users are unimpressed. This woman telling them they were selfish as she tried to get to her mother in hospital.
She's in the ambulance. She's going to the hospital in Canterbury. Do you think I'm stupid? She's in Canterbury. I need to go to the hospital. Get out of the way now.
At one location where an ambulance was trying to get through, tempers were lost.
Hey guys, get out the road.
As furious drivers and even the ambulance crew dragged protesters off the road. But Insulate Britain say they won't stop this kind of disruption until the government pledges to insulate all of Britain's homes by 2030, no matter what the public think.
People are just fed up with what you're doing, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, yeah. And this is about getting a meaningful statement from the government that we can trust, and if they gave that statement, we'd be off the roads immediately. This is about what's morally right and morally wrong.
And is it morally right to be stopping ambulances, stopping people getting to hospitals?
Well, we're talking about the death and destruction of millions of people and the destruction of our society.
Are you saying that those people's lives don't matter because you're talking about other lives in the future?
No, I'm saying that the collapse of our health service is also relevant in this discussion, isn't it?
To insulation?
In terms of the climate crisis.
38 people were arrested on this 11th day of action, but so far the protests have only led to a fresh government injunction at the weekend, banning Insulate Britain from blocking roads in and around London. Martha Fairley, News at 10.
And finally, to the 14-year-old music marvel preparing to take up one of the most prestigious roles in classical music. Whilst most girls her age will be heading to the cinema or playing computer games, Rageh will be playing violin in one of the oldest and most prestigious orchestras in the country. But the teen is no novice. She first picked up the instrument a decade ago, and she's already built up quite a following.
She's just 14, and already Rageh has a talent that can only be described as sublime. She's already performed in 20 countries, and this weekend will take to the stage with the London
BBC
Mozart
One,
Players
where you are.
to perform Tchaikovsky's Concerto in D major.
If you're playing those just technically challenging pieces, it's like being a bricklayer. But I think that if you're playing the more emotionally deep pieces, I get to be like the architect for like the vision of the entire structure of the building.
Please welcome there. Rageh's first public performance was in Newcastle, aged 4. The applause hasn't stopped since.
I kind of feel like, a spy. I mean, I'm just travelling around the world and then at school just like a normal schoolgirl. And I do spend a lot of time with my friends when I can. And even if I'm away, I, text them.
Rageh has just become the London Mozart Players' youngest ever artist in residence. As the UK's longest established chamber orchestra, it has a reputation developing exceptional young talent. Rageh's musical tastes stretch far and wide.
I listen to lots of music, all types of music. I do listen to lots of pop songs, and I also sometimes like playing jazz music or just improvising.
Her musical journey has taught her a simple lesson.
I believe that if you love something, you should do it. Just love what you do and do what you love.
And for Rageh, her passion for music and performing leaves audiences mesmerised. Neil Connery, News at 10, Oxford.
Talented girl, to say the least. And that's it from me and everyone on the News at 10 team. Thank you for watching, and a very good night.